Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on this edition of Conservation in the Classroom, where you get to learn from and interact with WWF conservation experts. My name is Kate, and I will be your host. Today's event, as you may have predicted, is all about elephants, particularly Asian elephants. Now, Asian elephants have a huge role in their environment, but unfortunately are facing many challenges due to threats posed by humans. So today, to tell us more about that, and to kind of share with us what WWF is doing to help protect these elephants is Asian Species Conservation Manager, Nilanga Jayasinghe. So Nilanga is here. We are so excited. Hi, Nilanga. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Kate. Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all briefly earlier on the camera. I hope to see you again at the end, but it's great to be here to share some information about Asian elephants. So I hope you can learn a lot from this conversation.
So before I officially pass things over to Nilanga, as you all know, we need to say hi to our special guests that we have joining us on screen today. So we're going to bring them in one at a time. First up, coming to us from Bridgeport, Ohio, we have Bridgeport Middle School, Talented and Gifted. What's up? Okay, next, coming to us from Onaway, Michigan, we have the Orta family and friends. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
They're silent.
Don't be shy now. Oh, there we go. Okay, and last but certainly not least, coming to us from Lebanon, Kentucky, we have Mrs. Thomas's Wildlife Management class from Marion County High School.
Hi, everybody.
All right, so we cannot wait to hear your all's questions at the end. Just a quick reminder to those of you that are watching from the web page, you're going to use that form that you see underneath the video screen to place any questions that you have during the event, and we will be sure to get as many of those asked as possible once Nilanga's presentation is over. So without further ado, Nilanga, I believe we are ready for you. If you want to go ahead and share your screen, and then as soon as it's in full screen mode, you can take it away.
Wonderful. Please bear with me as I get this on full screen mode. Getting there. Okay, I hope you can see my full screen presentation now. So we're going to talk about Asian elephants today. It's an endangered species, and there's a lot that is happening around them, and there's a lot that we could do to actually protect them. So I'd love to share some of that information with you. To start with, I'd like to set the scene for what we're dealing with today. So I'm sure all of you are aware that our home, planet Earth, is under a lot of pressure from humans and other factors like climate change. We're dealing with a lot of issues that we're trying to address every day in our daily lives. So, for some context, we are currently consuming natural resources at the rate of 1.6 Earths to fulfill our needs. Given increasing human populations, we require a lot of resources. And given those challenges, based on the 2022 Living Planet Index report that WWF co-publishes with the Luke Hoffman Institute, we now know that in the last 50 years, we've lost 68% of the world's wildlife populations. So this is where we come in as the World Wildlife Fund, or WWF, to work on conserving wildlife, helping people and nature thrive at the same time. So our mission is that we work to conserve nature and reduce the most pressing threats to the diversity of life on Earth. So we do that through a number of different approaches. We work on forests, we work on freshwater, we work on oceans, wildlife, climate, and food. So wildlife is one of the many components that we work on, but you realize that we need to work on all of these to eventually help wildlife and people thrive on this planet. So where do I fit in my role? I work on the wildlife conservation team. So what my focus is on the wildlife conservation team is on Asian species conservation. So I work with WWF teams and partners in more than 15 countries across Asia on various wildlife or species related issues. I work on tigers. I work on Asian rhinos. I don't know if you are all aware, but there are actually 3 species of rhinos in Asia. So the one you're seeing on the screen is called the greater one-horned rhino, or the Indian rhino, that's found in India and Nepal only. And then there's the Sumatran rhino that is found on the island of Sumatra. in Indonesia, and the Javan rhino, which is found on the island of Java in Indonesia. And of course, the species that we're going to talk about today, the Asian elephant. So the elephant's closest relative, you may not even think this is possible, but is this little guy. This one's name is the hyrax. So the hyrax is an animal that's found in Africa. You get two varieties, the rock hyrax and the tree hyrax. So they're the most closely related to elephants, in addition to manatees and dugongs that you see living in sort of marine habitats or estuary habitats. So historically, there was a time when there were very large mammals around, like giant sloths and other creatures that eventually diminished in size over time and became smaller and smaller. So we believe that the hyrax was also very large at one point in time, in long ago, many years ago. So the similarities may have been a little more evident then, but there are a lot of things in their genes or DNA that link them very much closely with elephants. So let's look at some of the things, actually, the poll that you got at the beginning. I'm really happy to see that many of you got the most distinct feature right. So on the left, you see an African elephant. On the right, you see an Asian elephant. The most distinct difference is the size of the ears. African elephants have these very large ears that are shaped and like the continent of Africa. Asian elephants have smaller ears that almost look like the subcontinent of India. So that is the most obvious difference that you can spot at a glance. Also, if you look closely, you'll see that the shape of their forehead is different. African elephants have a flatter forehead, while Asian elephants have a more domed, the two domes you'll see on top of their heads. Another key factor is that African elephants, both males and females, grow tusks, while Asian elephants, only males grow tusks. And today, because they have been historically poached for their tusks for the ivory trade, there are far fewer males and there are tusked males than there are tuskless males. There are more tuskless males around today. So there are many other differences that I won't go too much into now, but we could chat about later. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me at the end. But there are more than 10 things that differentiate African elephants and Asian elephants. Also, another key thing, size. African elephants are much larger than Asian elephants. So next, I'd like to share a couple of facts about elephants in general. What are they like? What do they do? They eat a lot. So they're herbivores. They eat plants, fruits, barks of trees. They spend up to 18 hours a day eating. They eat up to about 350 pounds of food a day. So to maintain their large sizes, to get energy for all the walking and the traveling they need to do, they eat a lot. They also have a very agile trunk. So an elephant trunk contains more than 40,000 muscles that really help them to pick up things. Like you can see in this picture, they picked up some leaves for eating. I've actually seen an elephant, a captive elephant in this case, pick up something as small as a camera lens with the tip of her trunk. So they can actually pick up really small things, and they can do many things with their trunks. So it's very agile instrument. It's another organ that they use for many different things. They are also known as engineers of their habitat, meaning that in the places where they live, in forested habitat, they may walk through forests and create paths for other wildlife. They eat, seeds of fruits, and then when they walk long distances, they'll poop them out in different places in their dung, and then that will sprout into a new tree or a new plant in a different place. So they use elephants are often used by plants as seed dispersers, so that their seeds can germinate in many different places, far and wide, through their dung. Elephants also have certain plants have specialized to only be consumed by elephants and then germinated through elephant dung after that. So they're very special parts of an ecosystem, but because they serve as ecosystem engineers. They also live in matriarchal societies. By matriarchal, we mean that the group, a herd, is usually led by an adult female, usually the oldest in the group. She may have daughters, grandchildren, sisters, aunts, other females that surround her in that herd. We also have young males in the herd. Males live with their mother and the family until they're about 8 to 10 years old. And then when they start reaching adolescence, they move away to live a solitary life, either on their own or with other bachelor bulls. So they really have a very tight bond in these herds that are very matriarchal in nature. They also have great capacity for empathy. They're very intelligent. They feel a lot. They have been known to mourn other elephants that have died over the years that they've known before. They come across the bones, they recognize them, they mourn. They have really great capacity for empathy. And as I mentioned, they also are super intelligent. They have large brain sizes relative to their body size. They're one of very few species that actually recognize themselves in a mirror. Many different species of wildlife do not. They cannot comprehend that they're looking at themselves. They think it's a rival individual and will try to fight them. But Asians, bottlenose dolphins, chimpanzees are some of the species that can actually recognize themselves in a mirror. They're also fabulous swimmers. They can swim quite fast across short distances, and they love hanging out and bathing in the water. So next, let's look at some numbers. So there are 3 species of elephant found in the world. 2 of them are on the African continent. 1 of them is in Asia. So first and foremost, we'll talk about the African savanna elephant that's found in Eastern and Southern Africa. There are about 315,000 individuals left today. So when you hear about elephants often, these are the guys you hear the most about. Then you get the African forest elephant, a little bit smaller in size than the savanna elephant. You see their tusks are also a little bit different. The shape of their head is a little different. They're found across Central Africa, across the Congo Basin region of Central Africa. There are about 100,000 individuals left today. Now, compared to these numbers, look at Asian elephant numbers. Less than 50,000 left in the wild, and yet they are not talked about much because much of the attention goes on largely African savanna elephants because they're very visible. The challenges that they faced over time, including the poaching crisis, where many individuals were killed and their tusks removed for the ivory trade, has been a very visible reminder of the threats that they face. So people see them most often and don't often pay attention to Asian elephants. Also, particularly people in the West, when they think of Asian elephants, they usually think of elephants in captivity, like the individuals that you go to see bathe or ride in places like Thailand or other parts of Asia. But it's important to not forget that there is a wild elephant population that needs our help. Less than 50,000, in fact, and I'll go through some numbers in a little while in terms of telling you, how many are found in the different countries they're found in. They're actually found in 13 range countries in Asia. So let's look at some of the pressures that they're facing. So in this circle, you see this is where all of Asia's wild elephants are found, on the continent. If you juxtapose that with human populations, this is also where most people in the world live. It's the most populated continent on the planet. It's very crowded. So you can imagine that there's a lot of pressure when wildlife, elephants and other species, need to share space with an increasing human population. So in the next map, I'm going to show you where they used to exist and where they exist now. In yellow, you'll see that historically they were found all across these areas from the Middle East all the way to northern China. Around the beginning of the 1900s, we believe there to have been about 100,000 Asian elephants in the wild. Today, they have decreased to these green pockets that you see in the 13 range countries that I just spoke of. So they are now down to less than 50,000, and their habitat has been constricted to about 5% of their original range. So think of these numbers and the declines that we're seeing. And next, I'll go into population numbers, as I mentioned before. Now, pay attention to the numbers as we're going through these slides, country by country, right? India has 27 to 30,000 individuals. Nepal has about 100 to 150. Bhutan, which is another country that's adjacent to Nepal and India, has 600 to 700. Sri Lanka, which is actually my home country, has about 6,000 wild elephants. In Bangladesh also, we have about 260. Then look at these numbers in comparison. Now we're moving to Southeast Asia. First, we looked at South Asia. Myanmar, around 2,000 or so elephants in the wild. Thailand has a slightly larger population, now more like around 4,000 at this point in time. Then Laos, the estimate is about 500 to 600, really, probably around 300. Cambodia also very likely, realistically, has about 300 to 350 elephants. Vietnam has around 100, perhaps less than 100. Indonesia has these 2 separate populations. On the island of Sumatra, it's believed currently to be around 1,000 or so wild elephants, while there are elephants on the island of Borneo as well on the Indonesian side. Those are Bornean elephants. There's a difference between Sumatran and Bornean elephants. So those elephants on Indonesian side account for about 60 to 80 individuals. In Malaysia, Malaysia is also divided into peninsular Malaysia on the continent, on mainland Asia, and the island of Borneo, where you find Bornean elephants. So the mainland Asian elephant, there, you'll see the numbers here, about 1,500 median number. In the Borneo, I think there are around 2,000 or so currently estimated. And then last but not least, we have around 300 elephants in China, in Yunnan province as well. So if you pay attention to these numbers, I'm going to bring up the map again that I brought up before. And you'll see within this first circle, South Asia is where a majority of the elephant population is found. Total, if you remember, less than 50,000. So majority of this population is in South Asia. If you look at Southeast Asia, only about 8 to 11,000 elephants are found in the wild across 8 range countries. So those numbers are very few compared to what the numbers that are found in South Asia. And we think that number makes up about 16 to 20% of the entire wild Asian elephant population. So numbers are really down in this area. So let's look more closely at some of the threats that they're facing. So the biggest threat, if you recall earlier, they're living on a very populated continent. So the biggest threat that they're facing is habitat loss. They're losing their homes. Their wild habitat is being taken over by human development, agriculture, settlements, infrastructure. A lot of different things are coming into their homes, and they're losing their habitat, their food, the resources that they need to survive. So this leads to this kind of image. You'll see on the left, there are trees in a forest, and the right, they've all been cut down for whatever purpose that is leading to. This could also be for plantations. Things like oil palm are developed in a lot of elephant habitat, and oil palm can be very destructive to natural habitat and cause a lot of problems for elephants and other wildlife as well. The other key threat is leading from habitat loss is that elephants can then come into contact with people more often. So that leads to negative interactions, what we call human-elephant conflict. Elephants also are very, very wide-ranging. They travel across large areas of land, and often protected areas, which are also man-made boundaries of areas that we're protecting for wildlife, largely also are next to human inhabited areas. So when elephants are moving around across their historic range, they often encounter people, and that can lead to a lot of dangerous situations. They can destroy people's crops, their homes. Sometimes people lose their lives when they accidentally encounter elephants. And in return, people's perception, they lose their tolerance for elephants. And in return, they can go and kill elephants as a way to sort of stop this conflict from happening. So these are some of the things you'll see. Here's a picture of elephants in a rice field or a paddy field, walking through close to some people. They can be in someone's backyard, which leads to conflict. They could destroy people's homes. So these are the types of things that we're facing in light of these situations that we're dealing with. There can also be, there's a huge wave of infrastructure, roads, railway, all coming into Asia that can really impact elephant habitat and disrupt their movement. That can break the connectivity for elephants between habitats. So that means they have to cross roads, they have to cross railway lines. That could lead to both collisions, with cars and other vehicles, trains, that can lead to the death of both the elephant and people. So this is a quick image to show you what that might look like. On the left is a national park in India, where right next to it, there's a significantly busy highway. So elephants and other wildlife cross back and forth a lot here, and that could lead to some issues. But you'll see that governments are putting in place measures to notify people that these are movement corridors and to slow down as they're going through so as not to impact wildlife. The other threat we're looking at, another one, is poaching and illegal wildlife trade. We talked about the demand for tusks for the ivory trade, right? So this is an image of, a tusk and what the tusk is being turned into, sort of decorative ornaments, jewelry that is being sold in the market and people then buy. So any elephant that has a tusk is fair game, is targeted for their tusks for the ivory trade, the illegal trade in ivory in many places. Also, we're noticing that there's now a rising demand for elephant skin for various uses. There's no scientific proof behind any of this, but the skin, the properties of the skin are being marketed for various uses. Like if it's the under layer of the skin, if it's dried, powdered, and mixed with herbs, it's being sold as a treatment for skin diseases like eczema and dermatitis. Also, that is then hardened into these beads and turned into good luck charms. There's no proven value, but this is another way that people have figured out that they can make some money off of wildlife products. So this trade is also illegal. And we are working on, sort of looking at trying to monitor the sale of these and working on addressing these threats. Another key issue, particularly in Southeast Asia, is the issue of snaring. People are setting these wire snares to catch wildlife for meat, like deer, boar, other species, and often elephants, especially babies, get caught in these. And eventually, the wire snare tightens more and more around the foot or the trunk of the elephant, cuts off circulation, leads to infection and eventual death of elephants. So these are significant threats that they're facing. And also, the other important piece I want to mention is they also have the threat of small population isolation. In some places, there are very small populations in separate pockets of habitat that are isolated from each other. They can't meet each other, they can't mate, they can't produce new offspring and spread their genes. So when they die, those populations then blink out. So these are some significant issues that we're facing across a lot of elephant range. So I want to focus in a little bit more on Southeast Asia because I'd love to share some information on what we're doing to address these threats and promote elephant conservation, particularly in this region. Because if you remember my numbers from before, this region has about 8 to 11,000 individuals left in the wild. They're declining. They need a lot of help to ensure that they're not, eventually going to go extinct, and to ensure that we're really working towards a better future for elephants. We want all Asian elephants to thrive, but this area in particular, within this circle, is where we need a lot of focus right now. And these numbers that you'll see, the dots in different places, those are landscapes that WWF actually works in on the ground across these 8 range countries. So I'm going to list some of these 8 range countries so you know what we're talking about. We work in Myanmar, we work in Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and China. So these are the 8 countries we're focusing on. And then we decided we wanted to develop a new strategy that really focuses on improving conservation in this region in particular. So why we want to do that is we want to build a capacity of WWF teams and partners on the ground to be able to do this elephant conservation at a much bigger level than we're doing right now, because we need a bigger effort to really have a difference on the ground. I also mentioned that Asian elephants don't get a lot of attention. So we need to enhance communication to talk about what they're dealing with in the wild and what we can do to protect them. We also need to generate funding to be able to do the work on the ground and to elevate what we're doing to the next level to have greater impact for elephant conservation. And this whole initiative or this strategy is also founded on 3 guiding principles. One is that elephants, they're large, they have a lot of resource-based needs. So if you are protecting an elephant, for instance, you are protecting a really large area that also benefits multiple other species and people and everyone else that shares that space. This is what we call Asian elephants a flagship species, or you might have heard of the term keystone species. They are indicators of ecosystem health. If you are protecting them, you are protecting so much more. Then we also need landscape level approaches to benefit both wildlife and people. By landscape, what we mean is, as WWF, we don't just work in protected areas. Because I think you might recall I mentioned that Asian elephants don't just stick to the boundaries of protected areas. I'll give you one fact that you can take with you, is that currently the statistic is that 75% of Asian elephant populations are found outside protected areas. So we need to be working way beyond protected areas in large landscapes that can include protected areas, human inhabited land, plantations, any other kind of mixed use areas that are part of a much broader landscape where you can work on broader conservation efforts that have greater impact across a wider area of land. So the landscape approach is really important. And of course, to be able to have this impact and deliver a difference on the ground, we need partnerships. So everyone needs to be a partner to help deliver on Asian elephant conservation on the ground. And that includes you. You can be a partner. You can be an ally in this effort to help share information and get information across to others who may not know much about Asian elephants. So then we looked at how we wanted to kind of focus our strategy along which priority areas. And our main vision is that we want elephant populations in range countries to be stable and healthy through various approaches that we want to take. So our main approaches that we want to look at and how we do that, you recall that habitat loss was the biggest issue. So our main pillar of work really focused on securing and protecting elephant habitat. You'll also recall the second biggest threat is human-elephant conflict. So our second pillar of work focused on helping manage this human-elephant conflict with both the communities that are impacted and many other stakeholders that have a role to play in managing that conflict. And our third pillar, which we call restoring elephant populations, includes a number of different things that we want to work on that I'll go into in a little bit. So sharing a bit more information on what this means under each pillar of work. Under our first habitat protection pillar, we're working on protecting habitat. We're working on connecting habitat. You'll recall that things like roads and railways separate habitat. They fragment habitat. So we want to connect them, do that work to ensure that wildlife can move freely. We want to restore habitat that may have been lost over time. And we want to reduce the impacts from things like infrastructure. So for our human-elephant conflict management work, we want to develop and implement ways to manage this conflict using different tools and with many different partners that are impacted or are impacting the issue to protect everybody involved. So it's not just for elephants, but for people and everyone involved. So thirdly, I mentioned restoring elephant populations under this pillar of work. We want to conduct scientific research to understand exactly how many elephants are found in these countries. We want to understand where they're moving through by putting things like GPS tracking collars on them. We want to also work on protecting elephants and addressing the illegal wildlife trade, like the ivory and skin trade that I mentioned earlier, and prevent them from getting killed in the wild by poachers. We want to help manage small populations in places where populations may be isolated. You'll recall I talked about small population isolation earlier. How do we help manage these populations? And last but not least, we want to also understand the health of elephants here, just to make sure that there are no disease transference opportunities between captive and wild elephants, and also even in the wild. So these are mainly our programmatic areas of work, but we also have 3 supporting areas of work that I want to talk a little bit about next. First is Voices for the Herd, and this is enhancing communications and awareness efforts, which I talked about earlier is so important to raise the profile of Asian elephants. So this picture was actually taken in Myanmar, the country of Myanmar, a few years ago, where they were starting to see this poaching crisis for skin. Trade, elephant herds were being killed and their skin removed for the sale. I talked earlier about how it's being sold for various things. So we partnered with an artist to develop this life-size papier-mâché elephants that were placed in the main square. And you all know social media. We asked people to come and take selfies of themselves with these elephants and post on, Instagram, Facebook, other social media platforms to share information about the plight of Asian elephants and to raise awareness. Don't buy elephant products. Don't, support the sale of these, or just to raise awareness of what they were facing in the wild. So these are the types of, and this was a very successful campaign. This is the type of thing we want to replicate for Asian elephants across the board, across the region, to enhance communications efforts. And you can play a part in that. And I'll get to that in a little bit as well. Next, we want to talk about, again, I talked about this before, partnerships are really important for us to be able to do the work we want to do at the scale we want to do it. Key partners include governments of these countries that we really need to work with to make sure we're making a difference on the ground. We have other NGOs that we work with. We, of course, work with communities on the ground, the public, development agencies, corporations and companies, many different stakeholders to make sure we're maximizing impact for Asian elephants. And then, of course, we need funding to be able to do the work on the ground and expand everything that we're doing to achieve that kind of impact for Asian elephants. So all of this, we pulled all this strategy together, which led to August of last year, 2023. World Elephant Day is August 12th. If in case you did not know that, remember that this year, so you can share that with your friends and family and make sure that you're celebrating that day. It's a really important day. So what we did last year was we released our strategy on World Elephant Day. Our strategy is called Ellie Allies, meaning you're allies of elephants, friends of elephants. And we did that in Bangkok, Thailand, where we brought all of our WWF country teams and regional teams together. We talked about where we wanted to move this strategy, for how we wanted to move it forward. We launched it together, and that was a really successful, event for us to really do more for Asian elephants. And at the same time, we launched a website here where you can find a lot of information on our strategy. There's a great video on there for you to check out later, and other information that you can take and use to share awareness with others. And on the website, you'll also see this really cool infographic where it's a snapshot of what elephants are facing and what we're doing to protect them. So you can use that to share information with friends and family as well. So next, let's stop and think about what you can do to help. So I've been saying this throughout this presentation. Please share information about Asian elephants. They need your help. They need your love to be able to have a bright future in the wild. So please share as much information, what you've learned today. Please share with your friends and family. And I'll also say that, you may be aware of Forest Stewardship Council certified products, meaning that these are products that are certified in a way that identifies them as not impacting negatively like wildlife and their habitat. So if you find products that are FSC certified, like even what you use daily, like toilet paper or other types of paper you use for writing, that can be bought that are, you can use them, products that are actually FSC certified, for instance. I would also say all of you, I would say these days are online a lot, right? On the internet, on social media. Look out for products that are made of elephants. If somebody's selling things, take note of that. Inform authorities to make sure it's legal. If it's legal or it's illegal, you can play a role in monitoring what is happening online, particularly in along the lines of illegal wildlife trade, elephants and other wildlife products, etc. And last but not least, I will say keep learning. There's a lot more out there information that you can learn. You could use this information and, enhance it, develop it, become a conservationist. That's a career option for you in the future. If you love wildlife, this is definitely a career option for you. So keep learning. And with that, I'm going to say thank you for your attention. And I am more than happy to take some questions right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nilanga. Just a quick reminder to our on-camera groups that are going to be asking questions. When it is your group's turn, make sure you get up right in front of the camera and ask your question nice and loudly so we can be sure to hear you. And any of you watching from the web page, be sure to get those questions in the form so that we can ask those, as many as we can ask those as well. Nilanga, just to be mindful of the time, we're going to try to go through these as quickly as possible so the students can ask as many questions as they can.
Sure.
So we're going to go in the same order that we did introduction. So we're going to start with our group from Ohio, our Bridgeport Middle School. Let's bring them in, and whoever is up first, if you can come up and, like I said, nice and loudly ask your question.
My question is, how big are elephants when they are first born?
Oh, that's a good question. So I can speak to Asian elephants in particular. As you can imagine, they're big babies. So a mom elephant can carry a baby in her belly for about 22 months. That is a really long pregnancy. They are pregnant for 22 months and then they deliver usually one calf. Sometimes, rarely, there are twins born to elephants as well. So I would say when a baby is born, it's around 300 pounds. That's pretty large, right? It's a pretty heavy baby. So they're compared to an adult, it's small in size, but they're still quite large if you look at, a baby next to a human, for instance. So I would say around 300 pounds or so.
Okay, let's go to the Orta family and friends. Let's bring them in. What is your first question for Nilanga?
So I read somewhere that elephants were one of the smartest mammals. Is that true?
It is, yes. They are very, very intelligent. They can figure out things very quickly if they put their mind to it. And they've actually, if you look at issues, you've heard me talk about human-elephant conflict. And you try to keep them from coming into a farm, for instance, by putting a fence in place. At first, they might be deterred by the fence, but eventually they'll figure out how to get past it. Sometimes they drop logs onto the fence to, break the wire, or if it's electrified, if it's an electric fence, they can drop a log onto it, break the current. So then they can walk over it and through it. So over time, they're very intelligent and they figure out things that will help them get what they want.
Okay, good question. Let's go to our group from Kentucky, Mrs. Thomas's class. We'll bring you in, and whoever's up first, nice and loudly for us.
My question is what laws and punishments are there for poachers?
It depends on the country. Usually laws are, particularly as it relates to elephants. So elephants are endangered on the International Union for the Conservation of Nature Red List of Threatened and Endangered Species. So it is a protected species in all of the range countries that they are found in. So there are different laws. The laws are pretty strong in terms of punishment. Sometimes it depends on whether whether the culprits are apprehended, whether they're prosecuted appropriately. So there are lots of variations and challenges that we can encounter, but the laws generally are pretty strong, but they're also, as I mentioned, they're different country by country as well. The main thing I would say that is that elephant is a protected species in Asia, in all of the countries that they're found in.
Okay, we're going to take a question that was submitted online next here, Nilanga. So we actually had a good question come through from the 4B class of 2032 from Charleston, South Carolina. They wanted to know which products should we avoid if we want to reduce the impact of agriculture on elephant habitat.
I would say look out for the FSC label. That's important to see whether products that are in the market have been produced. They've been reviewed by a group like the Forest Stewardship Council, and they've been deemed to be less impactful on the habitats that elephants are found in. There are various things that so there are products out there that are also certified to be wildlife friendly. You could look for those labels or different groups that certify wildlife products or other products that are grown or produced in a way that's friendly for wildlife. So there are various things out there that you could look at in terms of certification. But just being aware of what you're using, how you're using it to have less impact on the planet would be really important. Every person can make a difference.
Okay, let's go back to our on-camera group. So we'll go back to our group from Bridgeport. If y'all are ready, whoever's up next, nice and loudly for us, please.
Did elephant lips evolve into their trunks? If so, why?
Historically, they have been different versions of elephant family at large. More broadly, there have been different versions of evolution, I would say, over time, of what looks like an elephant that eventually evolved. So historically they may have had, there are certain species that had trunks, others had shorter versions. So it's evolution over time, depending on where they live, what the conditions are, that also help determine their physical features. So there may be a number of reasons or ways that they evolved over time, but there are actually really cool graphics online if you do a search for the different types of elephant species that were found over prehistory, for instance. You may be familiar with the mammoth that lived, thousands of years ago, that then evolved into this more hairless version of the modern day elephant that you see. Mammoths were very hairy, lived in colder climates. So it depended on external environmental factors as well in terms of how they evolved to be what they look like today.
Okay, it looks like the Orta family is having some trouble with their audio, so we're gonna come back to them once they get their audio situation figured out. So we'll move to Mrs. Thomas's class in Kentucky. We'll bring them back in so that they can ask a question, and then we will regroup with the Orta family.
Where did you attend college, and what did you study that led you to this career path?
Great question. So I did not have a clear path to where I am today and what I do. I actually have an English degree. I majored in English literature. I went to college in California. I went to Whittier College for undergraduate study. I went to UC Berkeley for my master's, where I got a master's in journalism with a focus on environmental reporting. So when I was younger, I didn't quite realize this is what I wanted to do. I've always loved wildlife, but it took me a lot of, trial and error, trying different things over time to really realize and figure out where I wanted to be, where actually what my calling was or what my passion was. And then parlaying that into a career in conservation through various gaining a lot of experience in different jobs, learning a lot, and using that information in my current role here at WWF. So I think the biggest message here is there's no one way to get there. Some people are really lucky in knowing when they're around 5 years old that they want to be a conservation biologist. And that then they work towards that goal eventually and become a conservation biologist. I did not know that when I was younger. But then I also realized over time that there are different things you can do. There are skills you can gain through different majors that you can actually go through or do, and then come to eventually where you want to be and use the skills that you have gained over time in your current role as well. So the biggest message I'll share is that there is no one way to get here.
Okay, we're going to bring the Orta family and friends in. I think they're still having some issues with their audio, but they're going to go ahead and ask their question so that we can get them on screen here. Go ahead, guys.
How much does an adult, like, Asian elephant weigh?
Oh, I would say about a ton. That's like pretty heavy. Asian elephants weigh a little less than their African cousins, but because they're quite large, they weigh close to or a little over a ton or so.
Okay, we're going to take another question from the chat. I know we only have a few minutes left, so we're going to try to go quick here. We had a bunch of questions come in from Miss Jesner's 4th grade class in El Dorado, California. So one of them I'm going to pick that's a good one is that they read a book called Don't Let Them Disappear. So they were curious if you had any more book recommendations, particularly for young people in Nilanga.
I'm going to have to think about that one. There's a lot of good educational material. You can actually find a lot of good information online. There's also a lot of fictional and non-fictional stories out there. Sadly, there isn't a lot out there on Asian elephants that you can read that is not fictional. So I think we need more in the market as well in terms of sharing information on Asian elephants and what they're facing in the wild. So let me think about that and get back to you.
Yeah, for sure. If you come up with a good list, I'd be happy to send it out to folks on the Wild Classroom email. Okay, we are almost at time. I do want to be respectful. If anyone has to jump, please do. Otherwise, we'll stick around for a speed round if that's okay with everybody. So we'll bring in our Bridgeport Middle School group here. Last question. Our Bridgeport Middle School group here. Last question.
Do people tame elephants and use them on farms?
Thank you for asking that question. So elephants, particularly in Asia, have had a very long relationship with people. They have been in captivity for, a couple of thousand years. They have been used for various purposes. Today, you'll see them a lot in the tourism industry. People go to see them, captive elephants, and interact with them. They have been used historically for work on farms, for logging efforts, for many different purposes, as transportation, excuse me, used as vehicles in warfare historically. So yeah, they have been used for multiple purposes over the last few thousand years because they have had that long relationship with people in captivity, in addition to being in the wild, of course.
Okay, Mrs. Thomas's group, what's your last question?
How have you been able to gain the trust of the herds in order to research them?
Oh, good question. I think for researchers, it's a matter of spending enough time, particularly wild elephants. If you spend enough time around them, not close enough that they can interact with you. Obviously, you have to maintain. That's a big piece of information I want to share with you. Never approach a wild animal, elephant or otherwise, any other species. Give them the respect that they deserve. Maintain a distance. Appreciate them from a distance, right? So don't feed them, don't touch them, don't get anywhere near them, because that can either scare the wildlife, think that you're a threat. They could attack you in return because they don't know what's going on. And that could lead to situations of human wildlife conflict that we want to prevent. We don't want them getting too used to us either. They need to remain wild. So what researchers do is they spend enough time around them and observe them that the elephants also get used to seeing them. So that then they, display their natural behaviors, and researchers can then document what they're seeing. But it's always done in a respectful way that maintains a distance from the wild animal, but just close enough that they're getting used to having them around.
Okay, Orta family and friends, if you've got one last question for Nilanga, we'll sneak that in here and get you an answer in the chat.
How long do trunks how long do their trunks typically grow?
So babies generally, for the most part, when they're born, they don't really know how to control their trunks. Some learn faster than others. For the most part, it takes a little while for them to understand how to use it. So when they're born, their trunks are a little bit shorter, but as they grow longer, but their trunks also depend on the individual. Each individual is unique. Their characteristics are unique, whether physical or personality. Some have really long trunks that I've seen touch the ground. Others have, shorter trunks. So it really depends on the individual and the physical characteristics that they have.
Okay, I feel like we could sit here and talk to you for the rest of the day, Nilanga, with all of our elephant questions, but unfortunately we are out of time. I do want to remind folks that if you do have questions that we unfortunately did not have time for, you can always email them to wildclassroom@wwfus.org, and we'd be happy to share those with Nilanga and get some answers back to you. And just another quick reminder to teachers and parents, you can find lots of elephant resources on the Wild Classroom page at wildclassroom.org if you want to kind of explore. We have an elephant toolkit with a lot of fun activities on there as well. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today, especially Nilanga. This was awesome. Thank you so much for teaching us about Asian elephants. We're going to bring everybody in one last time to say goodbye, and we'll see everyone next time. One last time to say goodbye, and we'll see everyone next time.
I hope you learned a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining.
I hope you learned a lot. Thanks for joining.